Rita Hayworth opened her mouth on a film set, but could not say a word. The line was printed right in front of her. Someone had marked the exact place where she was supposed to begin. The camera was ready. The crew was waiting. Rita looked down at the page. She read the words once. Then again, her lips moved. No sound came out. A few people on the set looked away. Someone lowered the script. Someone else checked the time. After another ruined take, the silence in the room changed. It was no longer concern. It had become impatience. Years earlier, one hair flip in Gilda had made audiences think they knew who Rita Hayworth was. Now that same woman stood under studio lights, unable to say a line everyone else could read. Hollywood did not call that fear. It did not call it confusion. Hollywood called it difficult. The gossip columns were less patient. They called it drinking. And once that version reached the public, it was easy to believe. Rita had been too beautiful, too famous, too married, too photographed. For people who liked a fallen star story, the shape was already there. A line she could not get out was retold as a drinking problem. A confused public appearance was turned into proof that she was falling apart. A frightened look ended up as a few more lines in the entertainment pages. Rita could not say the line, so other people wrote the explanation for her. She was struggling in front of them, but the story moved faster than the truth. A woman with a marked script page in her hand became another item in a public collapse. Before anyone asked what she was enduring, they had already decided what kind of woman she had become. And to understand why that mistake came so easily, we have to go back to the first mistake Hollywood made with her. Before the silence, before the gossip, before the public called her a fallen star, they called her a goddess and printed the word everywhere. The word goddess looked flattering on a magazine page. It also did useful work for everyone except Rita. A goddess does not need sleep. A goddess does not ask for better roles. A goddess does not panic, forget, age, get sick, or make a producer wait while she tries to find a sentence on a page. A goddess is convenient because she is not allowed to be ordinary. Hollywood loved convenient women. Convenient women fit on posters. They fit in captions. They fit in gossip columns, which is useful because gossip columns are not built for medical complexity or human patience. They are built for breakfast. That was the first trap. The public learned to read Rita Hayworth from the outside. Hair, mouth, shoulder, glove, smile. The studio encouraged it. The magazines repeated it. Men bought tickets and mistook desire for knowledge. Years later, when Rita began to falter, people used the same lazy method in reverse. They saw the outside again. A missed appointment, a confused answer. A face that looked frightened instead of polished. A woman who did not perform the old Rita quickly enough. Then came the label. Difficult. The word did a lot of labor for people who did not want to look closer. It turned a medical question into a personality problem. It let Hollywood complain without investigating. It let the press print a story without understanding the body inside it. Alcohol made the story even easier. It fit the fallen star pattern: beauty, fame, husbands, decline. The shape was familiar, the facts could be arranged later. Alzheimer's did not fit that shape. Alzheimer's required a second look at the forgotten lines, the strange behavior, the fear, the delays, and the whispers that had been used against her. It required people to ask whether the evidence they mocked was evidence of illness. That is why Rita's story cannot begin with glamour alone. It has to begin with the label people used when the glamour cracked. Because before the disease was named, Rita had already been sentenced in public. The mystery is not whether Rita Hayworth was desired. The mystery is how a woman could be watched for decades and still be missed. The answer begins before Rita Hayworth existed. It begins with Margarita Cancino, a child standing beside her father while adults paid to watch. Before Rita Hayworth became a face on a poster, Margarita Cancino was a girl on a stage. She was born in Brooklyn in 1918. Her father, Eduardo Cancino, was a Spanish dancer. Her mother, Volga Hayworth, had also performed. In a publicity paragraph that can sound romantic: music, family, stage lights, applause. On the floor it was more specific: a child beside her father, adult tables, a number to finish, a smile to hold. The family act became known as the Dancing Cancinos. Margarita performed while other children her age were not being trained to keep a room pleased. She learned timing, posture, obedience, and the strange lesson that attention can feel like work before it feels like admiration. Later accounts have described parts of her childhood as controlling and painful. Those claims should not be handled like cheap scandal. The public facts are heavy enough without decoration. A young girl was placed in adult rooms beside her father, and her polish became part of the family business. That matters because Hollywood did not make Rita Hayworth from empty air. It found a girl already trained to give a room what it wanted. When a photographer needed stillness, she knew stillness. When a director needed another take, she knew repetition. When a studio wanted a young woman who could be changed, Margarita had already learned that the room usually came first. The audience did not need to know whether she was tired. They had paid for the dance. That pattern followed her. First, the family act needed a polished child. Then the studio needed a polished star. Then the magazines needed a woman who fit in a caption. Then the public needed a fantasy that would not talk back. Different rooms, same basic instruction. Smile. Stand there. Again. Do not make the people watching uncomfortable. Before Columbia Pictures changed her name, it saw the useful part first. Margarita could move. She could photograph well. She could take direction. She could hold a performance even when the performance cost her. The mistake started there. People watched her do what a room demanded and called that the whole person. Hollywood would only make the mistake official. When Margarita reached Hollywood, the first change did not look dramatic. It looked like paperwork. A name in a file, a name on a contract, a name that publicity departments could print without explaining too much. Rita Cancino became Rita Hayworth, using her mother's maiden name. The new surname moved her Spanish identity farther from the center of the story and gave Columbia a star it could sell more easily as an American fantasy. Then the studio moved from paper to body. The dark hair changed. The famous red hair appeared. Then came the detail that makes the whole process harder to mistake for glamour: the hairline. Rita reportedly underwent electrolysis to raise her hairline and alter the shape of her face. Say it too fast and it sounds like a beauty treatment. Slow it down and the scene becomes harder to ignore. Appointments, a chair, skin, heat. A young woman keeping still while the edge of her face was revised for the camera. Hollywood did not simply light Margarita differently. It edited what the camera would be allowed to find. The studio system had a tidy way of hiding this work. Hair, makeup, wardrobe, photographs, interviews, contract clauses, magazine copy. Each piece looked normal. Together, they built a woman the public could recognize before she spoke. Harry Cohn at Columbia understood the value of control. A star was not only talent. A star was a schedule, a face, a wardrobe rack, a publicity plan, and a problem to manage if she remembered she was human. Hollywood has always preferred manageable to truthful. Manageable arrives on time, smiles in the right dress, and does not ask why a forehead needed studio approval. The public met the finished product. They saw the red hair. They saw the new surname. They saw the face under studio lights. They did not sit beside the appointment sheet. They did not watch Margarita being moved out of the introduction. That habit mattered later. When Rita became ill, people again looked at the visible surface and thought they understood the hidden cause. They had learned from the studio. Look at the finished image. Do not ask what was removed. Gilda did not make Rita Hayworth famous from nothing. It fixed the misunderstanding in place. The film arrived in 1946. Rita was already a star, but Gilda gave the public a scene simple enough to carry forever. Her face rises into the frame. Her hair flips back. She looks at the camera with a calm that made men feel as if the performance had been aimed directly at them. Then she says one word: me? That was enough for the myth. Men watched an entrance and treated it like access. They saw a character and called it Rita. They saw confidence and assumed consent to every fantasy that followed. That was the second misreading. A role became evidence. A camera angle became personality. A glove became a contract Rita had never signed. In the famous "Put the Blame on Mame" number, the object is small, one glove. Rita removes it while the camera shows less than the audience imagines. The scene works because it lets men finish the fantasy themselves. Hollywood loved that arrangement. It saved money on fabric and responsibility. Rita performed the role brilliantly. Then the role followed her home. She is often linked to the bitter idea that men went to bed with Gilda and woke up with Rita. The wording has been repeated in different forms, but the meaning is clear. Men wanted the screen woman, then punished the real woman for being real. That is an ugly reward for good acting. Off-screen, Rita was often described as shy, private, and less certain than the posters suggested. But shyness was not what the public had bought. They had bought satin, music, hair, a look over the shoulder, and a woman who seemed to ask nothing back. The studio had made the confusion profitable. Gilda made it permanent. After that film, Rita could stand in a room as herself and still be compared to a woman written by men, lit by technicians, edited by a studio, and sold by posters. If she was quiet, she disappointed the fantasy. If she was tired, she spoiled the illusion. If she wanted privacy, she looked ungrateful for the attention that had already taken too much. The world thought Gilda explained Rita. It had not even asked where Margarita went. Once the image worked, it did not stay with Rita. It traveled without her. During World War II, Rita Hayworth's photographs moved through barracks, ships, lockers, wallets, and military camps. A pin-up was supposed to be flattering. It was also a form of possession at a distance. Men could carry her face into places she had never entered and feel as if the image belonged to them. The studios sold the photograph. Magazines reproduced it. Soldiers kept it close. Rita did not control where the face went next. That is the part people often miss about being desired by millions. Desire sounds like power when counted from far away. Up close, it can look like strangers holding a version of you and never asking whether you agreed to the terms. Then came the object that turned the whole joke ugly. In 1946, during the atomic tests at Bikini Atoll, one bomb was named Gilda, after Rita's famous character. Reports also noted that her image was attached to the weapon. Hollywood had already used bombshell for women it wanted to sell. Someone made the word literal. Even Hollywood, which could turn a haircut into a business emergency, had to admire the efficiency of that bad idea. A woman becomes a bombshell, then a bomb gets her name. Subtlety had apparently missed its call time. Rita was reportedly upset by it. She had reason to be. A role she performed, a face the studio promoted, and a word the culture used carelessly had been attached to a military test. The image had moved from theater glass to magazine paper to a soldier's wallet to a bomb. That movement tells us something important. The public version of Rita could go places the woman could not stop. It could be printed, pinned up, named, joked about, and turned into a symbol with almost no connection to her daily life. By the late 1940s, Rita was not only a star, she was a public object. That made every private choice harder. A date became copy, a dress became evidence, a marriage became a headline before it became a home. And soon, men would try to marry the image they had already learned to carry. Rita Hayworth married 5 times, but the number alone explains almost nothing. Edward Judson, Orson Welles, Prince Ali Khan, Dick Haymes, James Hill. A list makes the story look simple. A beautiful woman, too many marriages, too much romance, too much trouble. Newspapers like that version because counting husbands is easier than understanding loneliness. Numbers fit neatly. Women do not. The marriages tell a sharper story when you ask what each man thought he was walking toward. Edward Judson helped guide and promote her career. He also stood close to the machinery that turned Margarita Cancino into a more marketable woman. From the beginning, marriage and management were not cleanly separated. Orson Welles seemed to understand more of Rita than most people did. Their relationship had intelligence, fascination, and real affection. For a while, it looked as if someone might see past the poster. Then came The Lady from Shanghai. Welles directed it, and Rita appeared with her famous red hair cut short and dyed blonde. To an ordinary person, that is a haircut. To Columbia, it was damage to the brand. Harry Cohn was furious because the studio had spent years building Rita's red-haired identity. That reaction tells the truth plainly. Her hair was not treated as hair, it was inventory. Then Ali Khan arrived with the most expensive-looking misunderstanding of all. a prince, a title, a wedding, international society, photographers, jewels. The story looked like rescue because newspapers love fairy tales, especially when the woman does all the suffering and the headline gets all the sparkle. But Ali Khan did not restore Margarita Cancino. He gave Rita Hayworth a royal frame. The marriage produced a daughter, Yasmin, and more headlines. It did not produce the ordinary life Rita seemed to want. The attention followed her. The cultural distance was real. The image remained louder than the woman. After the prince came more marriages, more explanations, more public counting. The pattern on the page made Rita look unstable. The pattern underneath looked different. A woman kept stepping toward love and finding another room where the poster had arrived before she did. By the time her health began to fail, the public already knew how to blame Rita for not matching the version it preferred. By the later years of Rita Hayworth's career, Hollywood already had a file full of old assumptions about her. Too desired, too married, too emotional, too difficult. So when the symptoms appeared, people did not begin with medicine. They began with the file. On sets and in public appearances, Rita struggled in ways that were hard to explain from the outside. She forgot lines, she seemed confused, her mood could change. At times, she appeared lost in situations where a star was expected to be polished, charming, and easy to manage. The room saw behavior. The room did not see a disease. That gap gave gossip plenty of space to work. Gossip is very brave when the patient has not been diagnosed yet. It can point, whisper, and act as if cruelty is just observation with better posture. A script supervisor could mark a missed line. A producer could complain about delays. A reporter could describe a strange appearance. A column could turn a frightening symptom into a character flaw by breakfast. Alcohol became the explanation because it fit what people thought they already knew. It was visible enough, repeatable enough, and cruelly useful. It allowed everyone to avoid the harder possibility that Rita was not choosing the collapse. Her brain was taking parts of her from her. Early-onset Alzheimer's was not widely understood then as it is today. Rita was too young for many people to recognize the illness clearly. She was also too famous for people to stop watching. That is a dangerous combination. Private confusion under public lighting. The woman who had once been judged for being too perfect was now judged for falling apart incorrectly. If she forgot a line, the story became drinking. If she seemed frightened, the story became instability. If she resisted, the story became temperament. If she disappeared from view, the story became decline. Almost every symptom was translated into a scandal before it was translated into a diagnosis. That is what makes the late chapters of Rita's life so hard to watch. Not because beauty faded. Beauty fades for everyone. The cruelty is that people were still reading her body like publicity material. Only now, the body was sending medical signals. And the audience still thought it was watching a performance. The correct word arrived late. Alzheimer's. By the time Rita Hayworth was diagnosed in the early 1980s, years of confusion had already been turned into gossip. The diagnosis did not erase the headlines. It did not give her back the work she lost, the dignity taken in public, or the patience people should have offered sooner. But it changed the evidence. A forgotten line no longer looked the same. A confused interview no longer looked the same. A public incident no longer looked the same. The drinking stories no longer explained everything. The difficult label began to look less like truth and more like a shortcut people had used because the real answer was harder to see. A diagnosis can do that. It does not undo the damage. It forces the room to reread the scene. Rita's daughter, Princess Yasmin Aga Khan, became central in her final years. She cared for her mother and later used Rita's name to raise awareness and funds for Alzheimer's research. That work mattered because Rita's suffering became part of a larger public lesson. For decades, her name had been used to sell desire. Now her name was being used to make people recognize a disease. The reversal is sharp. The same public that once studied her face for glamour had to learn that a face can hide illness. The same culture that had called her a goddess had to accept that she was a patient. The same press that printed old labels had to face a medical truth that made those labels look cruel. But for Rita herself, The correction came after the damage. She had been misunderstood when she was young because people wanted Gilda instead of Rita. She had been misunderstood when she was ill because people wanted scandal instead of symptoms. The world finally had the word. But it had already spent years using the wrong ones. Drunk, difficult, unreliable, fading, finished. Those words had not merely described Rita, they had helped people stop looking closely. Alzheimer's forced the story open again. It showed that the question was never only what happened to Rita Hayworth. The question was why so many people were so ready to believe the cruelest explanation first. At the end, Rita Hayworth's story is not a fall from beauty. It is a record of two mistakes. The first mistake happened when she was young. Hollywood changed Margarita Cancino into Rita Hayworth, and the public treated the finished image as the whole woman. The red hair, the glove, the black dress, the name Gilda. Those pieces were easier to remember than the girl who had been trained to perform before she was old enough to control the room. The second mistake happened when she was older. Her memory failed. Her behavior changed. She struggled in public. Instead of asking what was happening inside her brain, people reached for the story they already knew how to tell. A fallen star, a drinking problem, a difficult woman, a beauty who could not survive losing the power of beauty. That version was simple. It was also wrong. The two mistakes are connected by one habit. People kept reading Rita from the outside and calling the outside the truth. They did it when the outside was glamorous. They did it when the outside was frightening. In both cases, the woman inside the scene was harder to see. That is why the final image of this story should not be the glove coming off in Gilda. It should be a script page, a line waiting, a room watching, a woman trying to reach words that would not come. Not because that moment erases the beauty, the films, the marriages, or the fame. It does not. Rita Hayworth really was one of Hollywood's most magnetic stars. Gilda really did change the way audiences looked at her. The prince really did turn her life into a front-page fairy tale for a while. But none of those images explains the woman by itself. The glove shows the fantasy. The wedding photograph shows the headline. The forgotten line shows the cost of being misunderstood for too long. Rita died in 1987, but the public correction did not end with her death. Through Yasmin's advocacy, her name became attached to Alzheimer's awareness, not only to Hollywood desire. That is the part worth remembering. The world made Rita Hayworth unforgettable. It made her image last. But the person who needed to be seen was Margarita Cancino. She had been there from the beginning, just not in the version people found easiest to believe.